Hello and welcome back to part 5 of modelling a Mustang. Straight away we're in with inserting an edge to more closely follow the line of the windshield. You'll see it as I rotate the model. So as I was saying in I think the previous video, inserting an edge is hugely important for creating more entities that you can modify and therefore make a more accurate model. Now you don't want to do this all over the place. You don't want to have tons of inserted edges. Like you will have lots of these panels, but you're always trying to keep them to a bare minimum. I know it seems like a lot of panels are on there. Those squares, basically between the four lines. But there seems like a lot, but really it's not a lot. I've done other models that have way more, and they go way less successfully the more you add in. But this wasn't following the windshield right, so I decided to insert another edge to combat that problem. So yeah, a little bulbous on there. I'm sure there are other ways of kind of twisting the angle of how that kind of protruded, because it kind of curved around a bit too much. I've just gone by adding loads of edges, but there's probably a simpler way. I'll learn it in the future, I guess. Sorry. So yeah, we're kind of at a good point where we're probably going to get into modelling from the front perspective. I think so anyway. Perhaps it's not yet. No, we're not that. Yeah, we are. Sorry. So here, what I'm going to do is try and hug that my kind of shape more closely to the car, because you can see it's not perfectly clear because your model is like semi-opaque for the image, but the sides are not perfect. Also, if you notice here, whenever you do anything on the on one side of that green symmetry line, on the opposite side a yellow counterpart will be selected. So if that's the green line's a good way of knowing, but also the yellow lines that correspond with the ones you're clicking on the opposite side is another way you can tell that symmetry is active. But yeah, just in case your model's looking janky. It also helps you spot a few problems in case you've got hidden lines in models. So yeah. So I spent all that time selecting those lines. Could just drag this box like this. And from left to right, so it's only selecting the lines that you can see. So as I was saying in another episode, dragging a box from left to right, you select lines that are or entities that are fully within the box, not ones that are kind of half in. Whereas right to left is the opposite. Dragging from right to left, anything in the box will be selected. And you can see, because I've dragged that box from above, it's actually wrapped around the whole car. So you've got to remember that unless you click on the specific points, if you're dragging boxes and you're like looking from this end of the car and you drag a box around like perhaps the front headlamp, it will also select any boxes that are at the back of the car that also fit within that box, if that makes sense. So you've got to be very careful. It's not too much of a problem at this stage. I mean, like, I can edit the front, and if the back gets adjusted, I can readjust the back by selecting specific points. Like I'm selecting specific points here rather than dragging a big box. But once you've done one side, so I'm doing the front first. When you get to the back, you can't just drag boxes to do everything. Otherwise, you will actually find yourself editing the front again and then undoing all the work you've done. So just be careful with that. So kind of knowing which of these lines to drag. There's no kind of rule for it. I would just say it's practice makes perfect. It's a bit of a trial and error thing. You know, as I've said before, this isn't like a perfect model. This isn't like 100% accurate, but it's as close as I could kind of make in a day, basically. But you, yeah, knowing which lines and which points to drag, that just comes with practice. There's no kind of rule for it. If you see a point that looks low, then adjust it, and if you adjust it and you don't like it, just undo it. It's like I don't know, modelling something out of Play-Doh, or you know, if you've sculpted something wrong, you just retrace your steps. Right, so here I'm dragging a box from right to left, and so where I'm dragging it now, that also affects not only the front, but anything that lines up with this current view. So I'm affecting the back, and I know that because I actually want the back to kick in at the moment, especially on the bottom. It doesn't matter if it kicks in too much, because like I say, people aren't staring at the bottom of the car, but I'm just dragging those, and that is affecting the whole kind of length of the car. You see how it's curved under at the back now? Well, briefly. If you wonder how I figure out which kind of sections to be clicking on, like I was saying, it is trial and error. If you look at my video, I did a video called Cars, and that shows a real representation of what kind of models develop, like what sort of rate they develop at. So it has, I think it's 10 cars I modelled over the course of a month, and you can see like the first one is just a sketch model, and then the second one is like an extrusion thing, and then I changed to surface modelling, or sculpt. Well, this is surface modelling, it's just got a different name on SolidWorks. It shows kind of what sort of progression you could kind of expect, maybe. So here, like, knowing to click these panels, that's only because I've done other cars. I wouldn't always assume it was them. I might assume some more if I had less experience, but because I've done it before, the practice helps, and then I know where I've got to kind of be dragging. So just honestly, if you're wanting to model, I don't know, Ferrari 458, don't start on a Ferrari 458. Start on like a Fiat Punto or something easy, and then go through a list of cars that you like, and then end on the car that you really want to do. So that's what I did. I started, I think, on BMW, was it an M7? Or perhaps it was an Aston Martin Lagonda. Not quite sure. But I knew that the Shelby was the car that I really wanted to model more than the rest. And I didn't want that to be my first car, because I didn't want to make it and then look at it and think, oh god, this is horrible. So here you stretching those surfaces, you can stretch like each individual square, and that's equivalent to selecting the 4 surrounding dots, or the 4 lines that surround each section. So let me know. Yeah, so I know that the sides actually kick in a bit. I've seen top-down views. I've seen this car in real life, and I know obviously that the doors don't just kick out on a weird like right angle like that. So I know that I've got to kind of press those in a bit. And it's just kind of I wouldn't say tedious at all. Like obviously, like, you know, listen to music. It's just like just a thing you do almost subconsciously now. You just know you've got to kind of make small edits, and it's just gonna be a lot of clicking and dragging basically. So that whole line I need to kick in. Yeah. One thing that's important as well is you can see that the actual photograph from the front view doesn't show the car kicking up that high at the rear. Um, so you'd think to drop it, but then if you look at the side view, you do know that it kicks up like that. And what you do there is you have kind of your main photo and then your other photos. So my main photo is a side photo. You could have your main photo as a front photo, but my main photo is a side photo because it's taken from kind of a far away distance with a not a very wide, a very narrow focal length. So the car, it's not got much perspective to it, so it's really an accurate image. Whereas this is kind of been blown up a bit, so the front looks bigger than the back because the perspective's quite wide. So I'm not making changes. Here I've noticed there's a kind of an invisible line under it, and that is concerning. So what I've done is I've deleted, if you select any of those sections, you can just click delete. Oh yeah, I forgot the computer was terrible when I was working on it. So you can delete them to inspect what's going on. So if you see some kind of phantom like lines that aren't like full the full bold black but are kind of grey underneath, I would inspect it straight away because you could be ignoring quite a major problem with your project. One of the things about this kind of surface modelling is you run into a lot more errors than you would just in regular solid body sketch modelling, because there's no like constraints to each of these kind of squares. They're just how you drag them is how they stay. But sometimes you kind of miss points and then you create geometry that's actually inside it, and then when you go to finish the model, it will say error has occurred, and then you've got to go back and fix it. So try and pick up on any problems really early on. See where we are. Yeah, so here selecting quite a big group of shapes, but again, like I know this is affecting the front and the back, but I know the back narrows anyway, so it doesn't bother me. But if the back was really like a wider, like say for example, a drag car's got a very pointy nose, but at the back it like flares out massively. You wouldn't drag boxes like this to narrow the front. You would just click on the panels at the front and hold shift while clicking them, because otherwise you'd be dragging in the back panels as well. So when I refer to panels, I just mean those squares that you can see on screen that cover the surface, or sections as I've referred to them as well, in case you're a bit confused. Watching this video has actually made me remember I forgot how much screen capture like really slowed down the process of this. I could have probably modelled this in probably in 3/4 of the time. So I think I took 6 hours. I could probably done it in 4.5 to 4, but I had a lot of kind of these these times where the computer just slows down, and that's not just like a lag in the video. That's just genuinely what I was witnessing, and it kind of really slows you down. So here, making subtle adjustments at the front, just again trying to line up the lines on each of those sections with a kind of feature on the body. So in that case it was the top of the grille, and then we come back to the side. But yeah, looking more and more like a car every time you kind of come back to it. So see how I select things on that left hand side and they're reflected in yellow on the right? That tells you it's mirroring. And what I should do here is, you see how I've selected all the squares up until the center. You should actually select all the squares bar the one next to the line of symmetry. So that one, the ones closest to the line of symmetry could actually overlap and you wouldn't notice it. So that's something I've learned since modelling this, because what actually happens is it pushes those shapes across, and if there's not enough kind of room, then it'll kind of cross over and then do a weird zigzag thing, and it'll be hidden in your model. It'll be so minute that you'll never spot it until you get the error at the end, and then you've got to go and fix it. And after you've done all your final tweaks, you really don't want to be coming back to an error message. Just bringing that bonnet in at the front. Sometimes with this modifying as well, you kind of experiment with each individual car, like what certain modifying tools you should be using, because it really varies. Anyway, I think that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed, and take care.